Hello and welcome everyone to week 8 of the CCS. We are here for the analyst desk before our games today. My name is Lindorr, here today with Orion and Sultan, and we are joined by TDR co-owner Matt. Matt, thank you for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
Well, we've got lots to get through here tonight on the analyst desk, so let's get right into it. First things first, our first game in the Wednesday conference is going to be Collective Effort, taken on DNX. The reigning CCS champions, Collective Effort, set to face off against DNX, who many regard as the favorites to steal the title away this year in the CCS. Sultan, you had the pleasure of competing in the CCS last year, and although you did rank out after the lock-in this tournament for this split, you've been able to cast some, keeping up with what's been going on in the league. How would you think, what would you think if I said that the league has increased in average quality between last year and this year?
I think compared to last year for sure. I think this year, just like on paper, the rank of the players kind of went up, and we have more teams. Like we have close to only in the Wednesday division we have 10. I think last year we had close to like 7 or 8.
Right.
So we didn't have as much teams even in one conference. So I think the team number has gone up, and because of that, I think especially Fly did a really good job of like kind of scouting teams that applied and tried to pick the best out of them. So I think off that, the quality has gone a lot.
Would you say that it's the overall quality of the average of all the teams has gone up, or do you think it's those kind of top elite teams, DNX and Hard Hat Zone, who are kind of raising the bar a little bit more?
I think the top teams are really good. I think when you look at the, let's say, bottom of the barrel teams, it's kind of the same thing. I think there isn't much difference when you look at the gameplay wise. But last season it was just kind of like collective, kind of like just destroying everyone. And there was like Lost Chapter, I think that it was their name. That was like kind of doing good, but not like they were not still on the same level with collective. But like this season, we have Hard Hat, we have DNX, we have Goldfish on the other side of the bracket. So
fair enough. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Good to get it firsthand from someone who experienced the competition in both splits. So we've talked a lot about Panzora from DNX, right? It's been a topic of conversation last week when we streamed their game. This player has just been phenomenal in the CCS so far. But this week, the spotlight's going to be on the mid lane and in Vier, who's taking on Philly B, who is currently known as Lobotomy Larry. For those who don't know, I don't know what's going on with that. Maybe he's changing his name every time they get a win. I don't know. We'll have to find out. But Orion, based on what we've seen so far from DNX, do you think that Vier is up to the challenge of taking on the former CCS MVP here?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of teams, when you look at DNX, you instantly think of Panzora, and you also think of like Shady Gecko being able to facilitate Panzora and also Vier in that mid lane. But at the same time, I also feel like this guy has been a player to just very open up to picking champions very early on into draft and still being able to hold his own in the mid lane, which is a very strong skill to have, especially as the mid lane position. You definitely don't want to be kind of a detriment to your team. You want to be a rock. You want to be able to hold that strong foundation in the mid lane. So for him to pick champions like Ari, like Vex, very, very early on in draft and basically give away those counter picks to like Panzora, who's having a phenomenal split so far, it definitely shows that the level he's able to compete at. Obviously, Lobotomy Larry or Philly in this situation has been picking up a little bit as the split has gone on, and he had a couple rough weeks in the beginning due to some internet issues. So hopefully it will be a pretty banger of a matchup in the mid lane. But at the same time, we've kind of talked about how this team kind of revolves around Lobotomy Larry in this mid lane, and if he's not able to get things going against the rock in the mid lane, known as Vier, I mean, it can be a pretty rough series for them if Panzora and even Shady Gecko are able to just do their thing.
Yeah, I think counterpick is going to be important in the series tonight, not only for Panzora, but also for Lobotomy Larry, because like you say, he's really been the one main carry source for this team. I mean, the ongoing joke is Philly B in the 4 wards. So yeah, I think for Vier, really just, like you say, keeping it steady in the mid lane, going up against the former MVP. That's really all he has to do. I think he's got a lot of trust in the rest of the members around him to bring them that victory. And to sort of expand on that discussion around mid laners, it's worth noting that collective effort relied pretty heavily on Philly B, like we kind of already mentioned. Matt, as our resident mid lane expert here, how much do you think the current meta is enabling or inhibiting mid lane champions in terms of hard carrying games?
I feel like a good example of that is how Goldfish plays. Is they play through mid lane to play through other lanes, which I feel like was one of the downsides. That when we played them, that's what they did. We didn't really have an answer to that. So like they kind of played stuff like Yon. They played. They even played Zeri mid, which is pretty good. And they just played through that, and then they transferred that lead into their bot side or top side, and it was just really hard to deal with. So I feel like if you play stuff like that or like scaling mages even, it's very difficult to play against. They can definitely take over a game quite easily.
Right, but not really taking over the game themselves. You think it's more about maybe garnering a little bit of a small lead and then being able to carry that over into other parts of the map, kind of expanding on that lead. Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that because, obviously Philly B has some good players around them. It's just a matter of whether they're dumping all the resources into him or whether he can kind of spread some of that love around the map. All right, well, we need predictions now for this one. Collective effort versus DNX. Let's go over to Sultan here first. Last time around, it was collective effort taking down Hard Hat Zone. They took a game off of them, so that's our second place team here in Wednesday. Do we think that they can do the same thing here to DNX, Sultan?
Like it's kind of hard to, I think, predict. Like especially, I think DNX will win.
That's why I've got my best analysts here. Come on.
Like it's hard to predict the 2-0 or 2-0. I'll say 2-0. I think DNX is just like kind of working as a unit just a little bit better compared to, not a little bit, a lot better than Collective. Collective is like, can Lobotomy, Larry, Rowdy, Randy, whatever you want to call him, Philly B, can he pull like an absolute 1v9 performance and carry us through? And he can. We know that he can. But I think against a team like DNX, when even the mid lane has an even matchup, close to even matchup for him, I think it's going to be much harder for him to like go and like open the 1v9 mode.
It's so much easier to play around that threat, right? Especially if you're Shady Gecko, you realize, hey, look, they're going to try and play through mid lane. So guess what? I'm going to set up vision around mid lane. I'm going to maybe hover around for a few extra seconds, try to be there for counter ganks and things like that. So yeah, I think it does make it a lot easier for your opponents scouting out your playstyle that way when you do have such a kind of rigid style that you always want to go for. Orion, you think it's going to be a 2-0 as well here? What are you thinking?
See, I'm kind of in agreement here with Sultan. Like predicting a 2-0 is definitely something that like isn't as easy as you want it to be because there is always that potential for Lobotomy Larry to kind of have his performance where he's like, okay, this guy's like straight 1v9 in this game. There's not much you can really do about it. But at the same time, DNX, they've already basically solidified themselves as being like the top tier win state team, and we're getting close to playoffs. So this can potentially be experimentation week, or it could be we don't want to show as much going into playoffs. So they could potentially drop a game where they're playing a style of gameplay where they're not particularly like showing like, okay, this might not be our best style, but we want to show multiple styles going into playoffs. And it's pretty easy to drop a game while doing that because you're not necessarily as, experienced on trying to perform that type of play. So this could be the week we see Penzora on, so that's not just a true carry in the top lane. Is he going to play that? Is he going to play that in playoffs? Most likely not, but it's a style that they could potentially look to adapt and want to use in playoffs. So, I think DNX is very capable of 2-0 in collective effort, but it really just kind of depends on, okay, are we looking to like continue to show our dominance and play our best style, or do we want to show some different types of styles?
Yeah. How seriously are they going to take it? Are they maybe going to have a more fun game, or like you say, one of those games where they're trying to practice, maybe break out some new strategies, see if they can switch some things around? We heard last week from their support actually talking about how, they play through Penzora a lot, but there's a lot of talent on this lineup. So I think that there's definitely multiple different lanes that they can play through. Lots of players on this team who have capabilities of carrying. Matt, I know maybe you're not as familiar with some of these teams here in the Wednesday conference, but do you have a prediction for me here on this one?
I I think DNX is gonna win 2-0.
DNX 2-0.
Yeah.
That's the spicy stuff that I like. There we go. That's more like it. TA Light versus Dorado Gaming Omega is our next series. We will, of course, see if DNX can get that 2-0 victory. But for TA Light and Dorado Gaming, middle pack here, 5th and 6th, or 4th and 5th, somewhere in there. They're poised to make playoffs currently, but depending on, what happens here, we could have a pretty spicy run. The standings are looking pretty dang close here. But that being said, this middle of the pack kind of squad of teams, they've been pretty easily outclassed, I think you could say, from the 3 teams above them, that being TA Knight, Hard Hat Zone, and DNX. And so, Sultan, looking at these 2 teams, TA Light and Dorado Gaming, which individual players do you think on these teams have been your standouts so far, and who do you think of them is capable of going toe-to-toe with maybe some of these players on DNX or Hard Hat Zone who have impressed so much so far?
I think in general, for the side of TA Light, I really like Spoozy. I think their mid lane Dr. Phil and Chill, he's like a really good mid laner.
Mhm.
I think their bot lane has been like kind of not on point sometimes, but I feel like their top side is somewhat like consistent compared to the rest of the team. So I would say them. But like for the side of Dorado, I had the pleasure to cast the Dorado versus K games last week, and I think it was just like a bad look for the side of Dorado. They were not able to kind of like show anything against a team that is not bad. Obviously, he did like they're 2-5 in game record, but they have 6 wins. So like even in their losses, they can pull some wins out of their opponents. I feel like for Dorado, they need to, I don't know, they need to find something that works for them. So because of that, I don't think anyone sticks out from their team.
Right.
Maybe you can say their jungler. 1 second, I forgot. Reggie.
I got you, Reggie.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Reggie. He's a pop off player. So like he sometimes shows up and kind of pops off in the game. But other than that, I feel like TLI's top side is like the only ones that can maybe be in the top tier playlist.
Fair enough.
There's-
Yeah, just hoping for Dorado Gaming's sake that they can maybe find some more cohesion together as a 5-man unit, and then maybe some of those individual performers can start to shine through.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, Orion, coming from more of a coaching perspective here for yourself as a former and current coach, what do you think separates the teams like Dorado and kind of some of these middle-of-the-pack teams from those DNXs, the Hard Hat Zones, the Goldfish Gaming teams here in the CCS?
I think for a league like this, it kind of comes down to a couple of things. I think the one thing that kind of sticks to my mind is Dorado or TA Light. Yeah, they've been having some pretty good performances, but they don't have like the 1 or 2 players that like really stick out and are like just performing each and every single game. I know, like obviously, we have DNX, like Panzor is like straight like destroying every single game.
Yes.
Hard Head Zone has like they have a very fast paced style that's influenced by Llama and Alternative just destroying the mid game. TA Knight recently made a change with Yolveric going top lane. Dallas subbing in for the ADC, and they've been looking very, very strong as well. So it's like these teams, they kind of have to find a way to not only neutralize some of the mechanical differences between the 2 teams, but also have a very strong game plan going into the teams and actually being able to execute upon that. I think for obviously for the side of Dorado, losing last week's to Infinite still kind of puts Infinite in the race for making the playoffs. And Infinite as a team has been looking much, much better due to some of the recent roster changes they've been opting to making. So it's like if you obviously like besides the roster changes Infinite has made, Dorado as a team should be able to beat a team like Infinite, and dropping the game to them definitely is a bit worrisome going into TA Light, because TA Light has definitely shown much stronger performances than Infinite has so far. I think kind of teams are pretty similar. They have some decent teams, but they don't necessarily have like the really strong pieces that kind of carry them whenever everyone else isn't necessarily having a great game.
So really, it's just that consistent high-level performance from some of these players that we're seeing that we're not really getting out of maybe some of those middle of the pack team. Yeah. Consistency is definitely huge, especially in a 9-week season, best of threes, getting champions that are comfortable on and performing consistently each week, even if you're not carrying, right? Look at a guy like Peanut, who just kind of plays tank weak side for Goldfish Gaming. Doesn't have to do a lot, but consistently performs on that weak side style, and we've seen so much success out of that team. So yeah, I really like that call out. Some individual performances really pushing and elevating some of these higher level teams. And so I want to go over to Matt here. We're going to shift a little bit over to Thursday conference because the gap between kind of the middle of the pack and the bottom teams has been talked about a ton in the Wednesday conference, but it's pretty true, I think, in Thursday as well. So, Matt, last week you guys took on Goldfish Gaming, the top team in the Thursday division. How do you prepare for a game like that, considering, they were undefeated or close to undefeated headed into the game, and there's kind of this narrative around some of those top teams that they're just kind of a or two above the rest of the competition here.
I mean, we go into games like we don't think any team is like unbeatable or anything. Unbeatable. Right. There we go. Or anything like that. We go into games thinking every game's winnable, and every game that we go into, we are going to win. And there's no like mental block or anything against these teams. It's just another team in a plat league again. So everyone's gonna make mistakes and stuff like that. There wasn't too much like individual prep going on. We did watch VODs from when they were streamed to kind of see how they play, but for some games the prep didn't really show because we didn't have an answer for some of the stuff that they do. So yeah.
Well, then how do you think you'll prepare better maybe headed into the playoffs if you're having to face up against them? Do you think that experience from the previous series will lend itself towards that?
I feel like the experience that we had when we played them, because it definitely was, they were beatable. I mean, game 1 we did win by a backdoor, but
there's maybe kinks in the armor there, some to find some ways in, pass their defenses and blow up that Nexus somehow, right? Whatever it takes, you gotta go for it. So, all right, well, this series, back to Wednesday, TA Light versus Dorado Gaming has some pretty big implications here for playoff seeding. Like we said, these teams are sitting at 4th and 5th. They're both 4 and 3, so very, very close between the two of them. So they're going to be eager, of course, to win against someone very, very even with them in the standings. Who do we think will take home that victory? Sultan, I'll go over to you here first again.
After seeing their last week, I don't think they improved that much in a week, and I feel like TA Light coming into the series has like a better chance than Dorado, so I'll just say 2-0 for TA.
Coming in strong with a 2-0. Orion, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with the same sentiment. I mean, like I said, Dorado Gaming should very likely beat a team like OK Infinite, even due to some of the roster changes that they made. But for them dropping that match, and TA Light has been kind of the middle of the pack team that we kind of expect them to be, and in order to kind of solidify themselves as being potentially up for a 3rd place position up against their sister team in TA Knight, this is a pretty important win for them. While it is a very important win for Dorado Gaming, I feel like Dorado Gaming's playoff position is more or less secure unless OK Infinite ends up making their miracle run towards the later part of the season. So like it can kind of get down to some crunch time for a couple of these teams, but I'm going to say TA Light in a 2-1.
2-1. All right, giving a game to Dorado Gaming. Matt, have you had a chance to scrim either of these teams? Do you have any experience at all with them?
I think we played TA Light in the lock-in tournament.
Okay,
I believe. I think we did. Yeah.
Do you?
I didn't. I thought they were pretty good. I'm just gonna give it 2-0 TA Light. No game's gonna be dropped. Yeah.
All right, we got 3 TA Light predictions for this game. Dorado Gaming. If they drop a game here, they'll drop to 4 and 4. They'll be right on the precipice of getting pushed out of playoffs. Like Orion said, it's going to take a little bit of a run from either Blue Esports Fire or OK Infinite. But speaking of those two teams, we have a fun little game to play here. Something I like to call On the Bubble. So we're going to put our analysts and Matt to the test here as we enter Week 8. Because there's a tight playoff race going on here, everybody. So there should be a graphic up on your screen now about the teams that are looking to clinch playoffs. And so for Wednesday, there's 5 teams sitting really close on the bubble. It's TA Light, Dorado, Collective Effort, Blue Esports Fire, and Yeah OK Infinite. Orion, I'm going to come over to you here first since we just heard you. Which of these three are going to end up in playoffs? Or which of
Okay.
the five? Three of the five. Which
Yeah,
three?
three of the five. So I do think that TA Light is going to end up securing a playoff position, and I'm also going to go Dorado Gaming. Now, collective effort need to be very, very careful
Yeah.
because they're one loss away from being tied with Yaoke Infinite. Luckily for collective, their last game of the season is Zeal Blue.
Ooh.
So
Okay.
while I am saying they need to like be very, very careful, at the same time it's like, yeah, Zeal Blue is basically just kind of playing spoiler for collective effort. So if collective was not playing Zeal Blue the last week of the regular season, I would probably give it to Yaoke Infinite. But since collective effort does have that luxury of playing Zeal Blue, I'm gonna give it to the three teams that are already qualified for playoffs.
Yeah, strength of schedule definitely is a huge thing when we're looking at these. Like you say, Ryan, if collective effort lose tonight, they'll be at 3 and 5. If Blue Esports Fire or Yeah OK win, they will also be at 3 and 5. So yeah, definitely a very, very close race here. Assuming that collective win their game against Zeal Blue, that means it's going to take minimum 4 games to win. So for those other two teams, for Blue Esports Fire and Yeah OK, they need to win their last 2 series. So it's definitely tough. Sultan, are you feeling similarly, or is one of these teams going to make that miracle run?
I think it's pretty hard, and the main reason is that OK is like gonna play Red Panda, which is like should be a win for them, and then they are playing TA Light, which is I think I don't know. I okay. Well, if I have to make a prediction, I think it's gonna just YOLO and just say it should be like TA Light, Collective, and Dorado. So like no miracle run.
Yeah.
But if TA Light like somehow loses to Dorado this week, then I see Yoki's chances much better because they were able to take down like Dorado fairly easy, and
Right.
last week they were playing against them, so
And they play
maybe
each
an
other.
upset there. But I don't see Blue making it.
That makes things exciting. That makes me want Dorado to win tonight so that we can see some of that spicy matchup next week, because that would be fun. TA Light and Yaoke Infinite playing for that final playoff spot. That would be a banger. All right, Matt, you're last up. So far, we've got boring predictions here from my analysts. I hate to say it. Are you agreeing with that?
A little bit. I have Yaoke Infinite. They scrim a decent amount of teams in my org. I've seen them play. I think they're pretty good, and I think they will push playoff run. I'm gonna have TA Light as well. I think they'll make a playoff run, and then I have Collective actually making playoffs. I think with having the past MVP on your team, I feel like you're required to make playoffs. So I feel like he'll make sure they make playoffs. That's my guess.
I actually like that because Dorado Gaming, they played TA Knight in their last series in week 9, and that is definitely a losable series for them. So, yeah, all right. Yeah, okay, there is hope. Get a couple wins, get that one next week against TA Light, and they may just make it in. That's going to be it for On the Bubble. So, thank you guys. That was a lot of fun. TA Light, Dorado, and collective effort from both the analysts here. But yeah, okay, Infinite. I think they've got a chance. I think I would say yeah, okay as well. I think they can sneak in there. They've definitely been trending upwards here. So moving on to the Thursday conference, we have in our first game Goldfish Gaming versus Shadow Z. Goldfish Gaming, they lost their second individual game last week against TDR. Matt, of course, can speak to that experience. They did, of course, pick up the victory 2-1, but they did drop that one game. And so, Matt, you already talked a little bit about playing against this team. Do you feel like the Goldfish team, you have them a little bit more figured out now? Maybe there's a formula for success against them, or did they just kind of fail to execute in some of those scenarios?
I think I have it figured out. I just don't know if we're able to, actually utilize that plan.
Right.
But I feel like we definitely could. But yeah, they are definitely beatable, but it's very difficult to do so. I will say in our game 1, we got a little bit lucky. I don't know if we're gonna win a fight, another team fight going into the later stages of the game, unless we got a lucky pick or something like that. They're a very good team though, and they're very hard to beat, I will say.
So if you were to give Shadow Z one piece of advice here for their series tomorrow night, what would it be?
5-ban the mid laner.
All right. Just take Okami out of the picture.
5-ban.
Maybe you'll have a better chance. All right, I respect it. I respect it. Looking at the other side of this matchup, Shadow Z returning to the stream after a 2-0 victory last week, against Sensei Squad, which I think was a lot closer due to Shadow Z's lackluster macro than maybe it should have been. And so while their mechanics and their individual laning prowess was up to par, they struggled in some of those macro decisions and ultimately some of their decision making come mid game. Orion, if you were to put yourself in the shoes of the coach for Goldfish Gaming, going into this match against Shadow Z, how do you prepare your team, knowing that that your opposition has a hard time dealing with some of those macro coordination?
I think for Goldfish Gaming, while Shadow Z has been struggling to kind of making sure that they make the right decisions as the game kind of goes on, I also feel like Goldfish Gaming is just the better like kind of team fighting team. I think Peanut has been doing a tremendous job being just this side lane like tank player that he needs to be for his team, not demanding many resources and having Masi and Okami basically dictate the entire map. So I think if you kind of just stick to your style and you don't try to mix things up, I feel like you definitely could kind of play more to a 1-3-1 style, but you're kind of differentiating by like what's like actually been doing, like giving your team a lot of success in a lot of these games. So they definitely could opt into it very similarly to how DNX is kind of could approach their matchup as well. They could try to maybe not necessarily flex their muscles, but try to adapt a different style of play that they've shown basically all year. They've had like Matt said, Okami destroying mid laners and Monster at his side in the jungle, the very strong 2v2 duo, and everyone else on the map is basically just trying to like do their jobs and make sure they're not necessarily burdens for their team. Which I know understanding your role is very, very important, which I feel like Peanut has done a really good job for the team. Just understanding that he is not the resource guy. He's not going to be the resource guy for this team, but he's still drawing resources to him because they want to try to shut him down in these lanes, give their top laner an advantage. But kind of similar to Vier on the side of DNX, he's just been a rock for this team.
Yeah, those players that can draw that jungle pressure and really don't care. They can just, avoid ganks, trade flashes, start playing safe, make sure that their wave management is on. Definitely is helpful, especially because the rest of their team is on the strong side. They're theoretically making stuff happen. So, yeah, those players who can neutralize some of those opportunities definitely are huge for these teams. And so for Shadow Z, they're currently sitting at third place in the Thursday conference. If they lose tonight, they might be under threat, though, because they would be potentially tied with PGO if PGO wins tonight. And then there's a big group, 4 teams hot on their tails after that. So, Sultan, do we think Shadow Z is really the best team here on Thursday? Or where do you kind of predict they actually will end up by the end of the split?
I think they're the third best, and I like the recent roster change that they did. They added Frosty 5 to the roster, and from my personal experience in like plat leagues, I know he has been like a top tier, probably like one of the best mid laners in every single league that he played in. So I think they are better with this iteration of the roster. They also have like really good subs. I think their starting 5 is still a little like I think like Frosty being in the mid lane, he's a consistently good player. Nats has his off games here and there. Blue Shift, I think like a linear champion, so they have their problems, but I think when you look at the other teams in this division, I think they have much more like bigger problems than Shadow Z does, and like kind of having better players for now. I think they are the third best team.
What do you think about TDR? Because TDR right now, they're 2 games out of third spot, so they could technically try and make a run for that third spot, but realistically, if Shadow Z win a game, they're of course just guaranteed it. Do you think that with kind of some of the resurgence that we're seeing out of TDR, that maybe they could make a run for top 3 or definitely top 4?
Well, for sure, it's like when you look at their games, they were able to take a game of Goldfish. They 2-0'd Sensei Squad, which Sensei Squad 2-0'd Horizon. So like we can see even I think other than Goldfish, there hasn't been a team that we can for sure say, okay, they're just like gonna crush this week. It's like PGO supposed to be like a top 2 team coming into the league, and then like they just have like upset losses. Horizon, they looked super dominant, and like even after the roster changes, even after I left, and like Scomps came in, came out, came in, like all the roster changes, they still looked pretty good. And then they just randomly lose 2-0 to Sensei. So
Right.
like I don't know, it's hard to say, but I think TDR is really close to the level of like Shadows and Horizon. And they're probably close to Goldfish, because I think the last 2 weeks that Goldfish had against Horizon and TDR,
Yeah.
like they were 2-1s, and they were not like, okay, the 2 games that they won was like super dominant. No, Horizon
Right.
basically would have beat them if they didn't throw the 3rd game. So it's like, yeah, I think the Goldfish is not that far off from the
Maybe
rest of the
starting to
group
see
either.
some other teams starting to catch up with their level of play for sure as we move further
Yeah.
into the split. All right, it's prediction time. Let's go to Sultan first again. Goldfish Gaming, Shadows. What are you thinking here?
I'm gonna say 2-1 Shadows, because I did predict.
Ooh.
I did predict Shadows to win. I DM'd it to Flay, but I wasn't at home in time to put it in. I've been just like a Shadows fan for the whole season, so why not just stick with them? This is one of the spicy picks, I guess.
Well, we've got proof now. Sultan predicting an upset, predicting Goldfish Gaming finally losing a match. Orion, do you think that's likely?
No.
Ah.
I do think Goldfish Gaming has kind of slumped a little bit the last couple of weeks, like you mentioned, but they're still the team, I think, still a team to beat in this league, obviously, for multiple reasons. And also the past couple of weeks could be potentially like a wake-up week. I mean, obviously, like, Thursday's group has been a group where besides maybe like the top teams and the very bottom teams, anyone can beat anyone. So
Yeah.
it's like if you're an optimist, you're very likely to say, okay, Shadow Z could beat Goldfish Gaming, but I still think Goldfish Gaming is still a step above, and since they've been kind of struggling the last 2 weeks, they definitely don't want to struggle even more going into playoffs. That they want to kind of pick it up a little bit, kind of just make sure that they're the best thing they possibly can be, and this is the week to kind of show that they're still on top of Thursday. So I'm going to go 2-0 Goldfish.
2-0 Goldfish, getting back on that 2-0 horse. We'll see if they can do it. Matt, I need you to break the tie here. I think you've had the pleasure of playing both of these teams. So what's your evaluation of this one?
When we played Shadow Z, it was probably one of our worst series. I'll say we didn't play that well. Problems in draft, all that. So I'm gonna say I'm saying Goldfish 2-0. I don't think any team can really beat them in a series for now. Yeah, I will say that. No, I don't think until playoffs. I don't think any teams they're gonna go the whole regular season undefeated. That's my guess.
All right. Well, Sultan, you can keep holding that Shadows banner up high. You might be the only one holding it, but you're holding it strong. Moving on to our final game of the Thursday conference. It is Zeal White versus TDR. And speaking of playoff implications, TDR and Zeal White are going to fight to stay alive tomorrow night. So don't miss that match. Going to be a good one for sure. Zeal White have surprised many by winning 3 matches this split. They're just below the cutoff at 7th place right now. I do believe they are sitting at 3 and 4, so just barely behind Iconic Severance, who's actually just beating them in game record right now. So Orion, how do we think Zeal White has been able to remain in this playoff race? What is it about this team, despite maybe some of the criticism levied against them, that's allowing them to keep picking up these wins and stay in the race?
I think Zeal White, I think their wins so far are against PGO. They got a win against Crosspoints, and I'm trying to find who their third win was. They're 2 wins, right?
They
they're
have 3
only 2
wins.
wins.
They're 3 and 4. So
yes, I'm trying to figure out who the third
Grinchy
win is.
Goons, PGO, and what did you say the third one was? Crosspoint?
Crosspoint?
Yeah, Crosspoint. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they beat PGO when they were like probably considered one of the worst teams at Thursday's group. And then obviously they beat, other like kind of lower level teams, which, obviously for a team like this, like, yeah, Thursday's group has been very back and forth, a lot of inconsistent teams in Thursday's group. So they've kind of been pretty fortunate to pick up some of those wins, which, at this state, like when you're at this level of team, like obviously, like, it doesn't matter how you pick up these wins. Picking up the wins is the most important thing So I do think, like, obviously going against TDR, yeah, they have the same match record, but I still think TDR is kind of a step above, and TDR still has a chance to propel themselves to a very high seeding. And there's the last 2 games in the schedule are not teams that are overall pretty weak. They've got Seal White, and they've got what's the other? The other one's Iconic Severance.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
so 2 teams that are definitely I would assume a lot lower than them. So TDR is definitely kind of looking to kind of like prime themselves up to be a very potential to be a very strong team heading into playoffs. And these 2 weeks are definitely something that they can really show that going into it.
Yeah, and I think TDR has been on the up and up too, right? This is a team that maybe at the beginning of the season people weren't too big on them, but with some roster changes that they've had coming in, they've definitely been on a sort of resurgence here through the second half of the split. So looking to continue that one against Zeal White, but we talk about Zeal White and how they've kind of been able to deal with some of the teams below them, not so much having so much luck against some of those teams above them in the standings. But for TDR, they've underperformed a little bit, I think, compared to some fan expectations, especially to start off the split. And so, Matt, do you feel this team has underperformed, or do you think maybe this is about what you were expecting from the squad?
I think we had a rough start. The first couple weeks where we played some good teams as well, I will say. They were poor series from us. But definitely we've definitely been improving over time. I feel like we're gonna win out our last 2 weeks for sure, and
Right.
have a good spot in the standings for sure.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Mhm.
If you were to give us a little insider information here without giving away too much, what is it that you think has been the biggest change for the team? What improvements have you been trying to make, and how have you been able to find some more success here moving into the last half of the split?
We had a couple of people who are kind of new to competitive, so them getting more comfortable in this kind of format,
Okay.
it definitely helps.
Mhm.
So I feel like once they got more comfortable, they start playing their game, and it's really showing that we are definitely a top 4 team, I'd say.
Awesome. Love the confidence. Let's get right into some predictions. I'll go to you, Matt, first. Are you guys hoping to grab this one quick 2-0?
Yep.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Easy
2-0.
peasy. Pick it up. Say Zeal White. Sorry. Better luck
Mhm.
next year.
Yep.
Fair enough. All right, Orion, what's your read on this one?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-2. I do think, like Matt said, TDR definitely had a bit of a slower start, but they've been really picking it up towards the end. They've been picking up some pretty quality wins. Like, they took Goldfish of 1-2. They pretty handily did Sensei Squad, so they've definitely been like ramping up these last couple of weeks. And this is the time to really ramp. Like, obviously, like you want to be a consistent team throughout the entire split, but you would rather see a slow start and a strong finish than a strong start and a very sluggish finish.
Peaking towards playoffs, definitely very important, especially if you want to be making a run deep into those playoffs. Sultan, are you agreeing with these two gentlemen here?
I'll say 2-1 for Zeal White.
Oh,
Okay, so let me
Wow.
explain. I didn't really like say anything
Wow.
about this, but I think it was week 2 or week 3 where, like, when you look at Zeal Blue, right? Like when they were first coming into season, the lock-in, they had an insane lock-in performance that no one
Yeah.
was expecting. It was mainly off their bot lane. They were like, I think it was Yohabe and Zylandis. They were like playing out of their minds. And in week 2, after Zeal White and Zeal Blue starting 0-2, they made a roster change request where, like, they swapped a lot of players, and like 3 players from the side of Zeal Blue went to Zeal White. And after that roster change, they have been, I think, 3-3. So they've been
Okay.
looking way better with that roster. And thinking that Yahabe is like he has his ups and downs, but like when he plays, he drops like 20 kills on your team, but you don't respect that. So um, it's also like I kind of want to get some spicy picks in here. I feel like, especially in the pickups, there were like a lot of people just predicting the same thing. So
Mhm.
I'll be just like on some copium and say Zeal White.
All
I
right.
I believe in them this week. So
They are fighting for their lives, so I expect them to come out swinging for sure tomorrow. So we'll see what they can do. I personally have TDR winning this one. I think this team has been showcasing a lot of good stuff the last couple weeks, and I mean, even just hearing from Matt about some of the progress that they've been making, I'm convinced about this TDR team. I think that they're a lot better than some of us might think. But before we finish things off, we have one more round of On the Bubble. This time Thursday conference style, and it's a little bit easier here in the Thursday conference. This time, I only need you guys to predict 2 teams that are going to make it in, but there's a pretty big amount of teams you get to choose from here. So it's Shadows, PGO, TDR, Iconic Severance, Zeal White, and Sensei Squad, who still have a chance here to break into the top 6. Let's start with Sultan this time, because I think we started with Orion last time. Who's your 2 playoff teams out of those 6, 7 teams? I don't even know how many.
2? Wait, aren't they going to be like 4?
Sorry,
then?
yes.
Okay.
4 of them.
Okay. So
Yes.
I think PGO will make it. I think Shadows will make it. Like those are my 4 sure.
Okay.
And from the other 4, I don't know.
Well, you have to say Zeal White because you said they won tonight.
Oh
Or you
yeah,
said they're
okay,
winning.
yeah, Zeal White, and then okay, for the last one, I will pick Iconic.
Okay.
I think my reasoning for Iconic is not that they've been playing good, but like they like lemons, like the rebranded lemons from last season. These guys, I don't know what happens. They're like looking like a really bad team. They're dropping games all over the place. And then once the last 2 weeks comes in, these guys just turn into monsters. So like I don't know. I guess they can. I would expect them to sneak in the playoffs, but that would also mean TDR would have to lose back-to-back weeks. So
Right.
if Zeal White loses, I'm of course TDR is like going to the playoffs, but I'm keeping with my predictions for now.
All right. I respect it. Orion, I'll send it over to you here next.
Okay. So just to make sure, we're choosing between 3rd and 8th, right?
That is right. Yes. 4 of
Okay.
those 6 teams.
All right. So I'm gonna go. Shadow Z, PGO, TDR, and Sensei Squad as my 4th team.
Sensei Squad. I
Yeah.
like it. What is it about
Yeah.
Sensei Squad that leads you to believe that?
Obviously, Sensei Squad is a team that is capable of beating higher up teams. I also like kind of went through some of the schedules. I was like, okay, who kind of has the easier way of making it into? And
Yeah.
I do think it is Sensei Squad. I think for Iconic ends up playing Horizon Gaming, which obviously is a very tough game. And they also play against TDR.
Yeah.
So it's like 2 teams that are probably better than them. So automatically, like they're not necessarily looking as great in those games. I think Sensei Squad, they play Grinchy and they play Crosspoint. So 2 teams that are at the bottom. So if you're looking at just like just like statistics and math and how these teams like should end up like winning these games, I think Sensei Squad is going to sneak their way to 6th.
Definitely a couple of weak opponents for them in week 8 and 9. Matt, I know you got TDR making the playoffs, so give me 3 others.
So yeah, us, Shadow Z for sure, PGO as well, and then I'm gonna say Sensei Squad as well. They have a pretty easy end to the season. Well, not easy. Grinchy Goons are never a tough team to beat. But Crosspoint, I think, will be an easy series for sure. But I see them making playoffs as well.
All right. Sensei Squad with maybe not as much of a miracle run as we might see out of some of these Wednesday teams, but still need to make a couple wins here at the end of the season to make that final run. Sultan, remind me, you said it was going to be Zeal White, Iconic, PGO, and Shadows. Is that right?
Yep. It's going to be a rough. If it happens, I'm expecting some skins from Mr. Fly.
Yeah, you better hope Sensei Squad is bringing their C team or something, because they have some pretty easy matchups, I must say.
To be fair, Grinchy was able to take PGO 2-0. So like maybe Crosspoint just like pulls out the big upset. I don't know.
No pressure on those teams, so yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll whip out something spicy and take Sensei by surprise. We'll have to see. But we've got games coming up here in just about 15 minutes, so that is going to do it for us on the Analyst desk. Thank you, Sultan and Orion and Matt. Thanks again for being our guest.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. All right, everybody. Well, stay tuned. Get some popcorn, grab a bathroom break, but be back here in 15 minutes because we've got some CCS action coming up. It's week 8 in about that time. See you then. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the CCS here for Week 8. DNX taking on Collective Effort. My name is Lindorr here, as always, with Orion. And Orion, let's set some expectations for this match, because DNX coming in here still undefeated in match score, sitting at 7-0 coming into Week 8. Coming up against Collective Effort, who still are kind of on the brink of playoff elimination here, just sitting barely in 6th place at 3-4 right now. Definitely underperforming, I think, considering what the expectations were for this team headed into the split.
Yeah, and also, we had Mr. Philippi, or now called Lobotomy Larry, come on to the, I believe it was the CCS podcast, where he basically talked about how, yeah, they had a bit of a slow start, but they've been kind of ramping up here slowly. And the main thing for Collective, at least with what they said, like him and Flan, they kind of came on and said, our job is to make playoffs. Once we make playoffs, we're going to win it all. Like, that's their expectation. So, but at the same time, like, this is kind of the week to show that you're not just all talk. Like, this is a week to really prove that you can really bite back against a team that is supposed to be, the top Wednesday team of this group. If you can beat DNX, you can beat anybody, and this is a great week to kind of show that and kind of really back up a lot of what they've been saying so far.
Absolutely. I mean, if they get a win today, all of a sudden we go from talking about them as this just barely scraping into the playoffs type of team, fighting for their life. All of a sudden we're going, hang on a second. This is a team that might actually contest for the title come playoffs. They're a team that has shown they can take on the best teams here in the CCS. They've taken down DNX, and all of a sudden the storyline for the Collective starts to get a lot more positive. So definitely a big opportunity here for them. I think overall, this season hasn't gone exactly how they wanted it to. They had some issues with some internet problems in a couple of their games early on in the split, which is never something you want to go through as a team. Definitely not starting off on the right foot. But I mean, even considering what this team did last year, we definitely know that they have what it takes to compete at the high level here in this league. And obviously, on the back of Philly B, Rowdy Randy, whatever you want to call him, Lobotomy Larry now, as he is called, has been a standout player for this team 2 years in a row now, and is trying to make his mark here against DNX.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, like, it was a pretty big talking point for our introduction to today's stream. We talked about how the matchup between Lobotomy Larry and Vier is going to be a very crucial point of this game, as we're probably going to be getting into draft very soon, so probably won't be much of a longer delay. But for both of these teams, it's like, Vier has been the rock for this team. He's been very stable, very likely to pick his champion very early on in the draft. And Collective has very obviously been, just like Lobotomy Larry, and everyone else is kind of just playing around him. So it's going to be kind of up to Lobotomy Larry to continue to kind of show that he is this mid lane prowess that he can be, in order for them to even contest DNX, as we are getting the bans. Aatrox's been coming through, a champion that Tista has been playing a lot in this season. A champion that could actually potentially win out on some of the lanes that Penzora does want to do early on. So I do like that respect ban there, and we're already seeing the Ari hover here for Collective. Oh, never mind, it's Zeri.
Zeri taken away instead. Yeah, I love that you talk about, how well Mr. Rowdy Randy has performed through the split. I'm just going to keep calling him that because now I'm used to it. It is, of course, Lobotomy Larry now. He's just trying to confuse us as much as possible, and guess what? It's working. But yeah, for him being such a strong performer in the mid lane, I almost feel like this series is a battle of the solo lanes, because for the Collective, their strong point is that mid lane. For DNX, though, it's Penzora up in that top side who really is the biggest difference maker for them. So I think for the players who are facing off against those players, the biggest thing for them in this series is just try to go even, not fall too far behind in the early game, because we've shown time and time again between these two players, you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. They're going to start taking over the game. So definitely have to be careful. We are seeing some more top lane bans here from DNX, focusing on limiting some of that champion pool here. For Tizda up in that top side, Graves taken away. And we'll see what the Collective want to go for. Gangplank, something we've seen Penzora have some success on for sure.
Yeah, definitely one of the highest win rate champions for Penzora here on the top side. I do also think that against DNX, teams have tried to target Penzora early on in the early game, and it has actually had some success. But even though teams were he was drawing a lot of attention to the top side. The rest of the map was able to win out pretty handily, and
Mhm.
he was able to just kind of scale up, and he was still very useful
Yeah.
on that GP pick. And kind of like how you mentioned the solo lanes being very, very important, it's kind of resembling here in the bans. We saw 2 bans for DNX here on the Aatrox and Graves, and then even the GP ban. But surprisingly, no mid bans for
Yeah.
either side heading into this matchup. So maybe they feel like this is going to be a pretty neutral lane state. At least that's what DNX is hoping for.
Yeah, for Lobotomy Larry, I mean, there's still lots of champions up. We all know that he does love the Akshan in the mid lane. DNX with the first pick here, though. They are going to grab the Ashe, a champion that has seen some buffs recently. Most notably, the cooldown on her ultimate is much, much reduced. And with some of the CDR builds that we're seeing on this Orion, that ultimate can get down to be like a 30, maybe even a 25-second cooldown late game. It is
Yeah.
pretty disgusting.
Yeah, and I think Ashe definitely does have 2 variations. You have the lethal tempo, Gale Force, like the more traditional build, but I've also seen like Comet, Trinity Force, Mana Muse,
Mandate.
where like that actually gets down to like 20 seconds. So even though
Yeah.
like most like you can take cleanse into it, or you can take some form of like a champion like Nautilus that can potentially block out some of that CC. It's like, you can start the fight with Ash Arrow, then you can end the fight with Ash Arrow at the same time. So
Yeah.
they've definitely been seeing a lot of variations here, but still Collective getting a very strong bot lane. I know Flan has been prioritizing the Jinx in a lot of his games, so he's definitely getting a champion that he really likes to play. But Jinx, while Ashe has been one of the champions to receive a lot of buffs, Jinx was the champion that received some nerfs. And we are actually today playing on 12.6 as well. So a bit of some interesting other changes happening here as well. But so far, none of these champions were affected by 12.6.
Yeah, maybe we can touch on some of those changes a little bit later. One that I think might come up here is the Hecarim nerfs that we saw. A little bit of scaling power taken away from the horse a little bit there with some damage on the Q as well as on the E. So that champion that we've seen as kind of that king of the jungle for the last patch or so is going to get knocked down a rung or 2. And in this game, we actually see the Udyr banned away instead of maybe a Hecarim ban. But the bot lanes are now locked in. It is Braum for DNX to pair up with the Ashe. Some nice glacial synergy there. You love to see it. And their last pick here, it's going to be a blind pick in the mid lane. Vex coming through.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of surprised DNX didn't go for just a straight up Volibear pick here. I know Shady Gecko has been performing on that very, very well. And like we mentioned, how the Hecarim went down a couple of pegs, Udyr already banned, and Trundle banned as well. You're already down probably 3 or 4 junglers, and with Volibear kind of being the champion that wasn't actually touched, I feel like he'd been pretty popular. But the Akshan here coming through, a champion that I would say definitely does kind of fit Lobotomy Larry's style. Like Akshan's definitely, he's all about the style. He's all about trying to play for that level of play. But even then, it's like into a champion like Vex, you still have to be very careful on like the actual rope swings and the trades that you're looking to go for.
Right.
So definitely very curious to see how that one's going to end up going in that mid lane. But with Lobotomy Larry being the player that he is, he's definitely going to look to style on the air in this one.
Oh, yeah, especially getting his comfort pick in the Akshan. Definitely going to look to see what he can get done in the early game. Definitely can probably bully out a little bit. Just being kind of that marksman in the early game. Those auto attacks just hurt so much more. Heading into the bans here, yeah, some jungle focus coming through. Not too surprised to see that, considering we haven't seen any junglers picked up just yet. Going to be Shen taken away from DNX, looking like they maybe want to limit some of those weak side top laners that the Collective can then pick up for themselves. But Collective taking away the Nocturne, a champion that I think is very, very strong, especially in solo queue right now, and can definitely feel pretty good in the hands, of an aggressive jungler like Drip Irrigation here. So we'll see what else they want to ban out here on the red side for Collective. It is going to be the Akali, maybe? I guess that's a top lane focused ban against Panzora there.
Yeah, probably just something like, hey, I just don't want to play against this guy's Akali. There's no real indication that DNX was looking for the Akali here in this top side. But this could also potentially signal that maybe Tista could be the one taking the Akshan, like he doesn't for some reason want to play against that. And that top lane with the Akshan, like obviously that's pretty far-fetched in my opinion, but most likely Collective is looking to lock in their jungler here.
Mhm.
I think there are still some good options here up and available. Volibear kind of being the one that I think should be a pretty
Right.
high priority in this one. But Lee Sin, if you are
Ooh.
capable of playing it at a very high level, is probably still one of the best champions in the jungle role.
Mhm.
Gonna go a little bit more safer here, it looks like, with the Karthus. And since they are so far a full AD team, this Karthus pick definitely does make a lot of sense. Typically, you want Karthus being the only AP champion, so that way, like, no one is realistically going to be building any actual MR against him, or else you're just, kind of like you have a Jinx and an Akshan on the enemy team. It's like those like really armor reliant like champions to kind of be building around. Ivern so far hovered here against DNX, a champion that can be very useful with like kind of like playing around a hyper carry, but they kind of don't have one so far. So they're actually
Ooh.
opting into a Lilia here for
Interesting.
Shady Gecko on this one.
Yeah, Volibear just going by the wayside here in this
Mhm.
game. No one willing to pick that one up. Instead, we're getting some AP threats out of the jungle here. It is double AP now for the DNX mid-jungle duo, so not ideal for them, definitely. But, with the Ashe and the Braum in the bot side, definitely looking to get some CC in the form of the Lilia. And now they're blind pick top laner here for Panzora. What is he feeling like picking up? It is going to be the Camille locked in.
Yeah, so the Camille is a pretty good blind pick. They also kind of banned away some of the champions that he would like struggle early on laning phase wise. Like I think Aatrox can beat up the Camille through the early stages of the game, even the Graves potentially, if like you're able to kind of dodge out on that hook shot landing on top of you. So very curious to see what actually Tizda is going to be going for. Gwen as a champion is being covered, potentially Mundo as well. The only thing with the Gwen is you're picking a second AP champion here in the
Mhm.
top, so like you could very easily kind of build. Like for Camille could opt in for a Hex Drinker, like and be very, very easy into the Gwen and the Karthus at the top side. Mundo pick coming through, I would say, makes a little bit more sense for kind of like what the team needs in order to kind of
Yeah.
function a little bit better. You have the 280 carries. You're going to have a very beefy front line that can kind of soak up a lot of the initial, like you could potentially soak the initial Lilia E, the initial Vex ultimate, the initial Ashe ultimate as well. And if you're able to kind of survive those, Jinx and Akshan can kind of tear through
Yeah.
the very, I wouldn't necessarily say weak front line, but I would say honestly non-existent front line. Just a
Mhm.
lot of damage here on DNX's side.
Yeah, Camille maybe late game can be sort of pseudo frontline, but definitely isn't going to get more than maybe one tank item. Same thing for the Braum. I mean, eventually gets a little bit tanky, but is more going to be looking for, the Locket, maybe the Night Vow, things like that. More protection oriented rather than, being a straight tank. But yeah, I think Collective, they've got a lot of protection for this double marksman composition. You talked about their front line, but also just this Karthus can kind of stand in front of them. It's a champion that's really hard for DNX to just kind of walk through, and especially considering, other than maybe the Vexalt and of course the Camille, there's not a lot of gap close or a lot of dive tools on this team. So they're going to be looking for picks, maybe looking for flanks with the Camille. And so with that in mind, Orion, do you think this game is going to be more focused around this top side with the Camille into Mundo matchup, with DNX wanting to snowball Panzora, or where's the attention that you want to see these junglers going towards?
I think obviously for Karthus, it's more or less just about like scaling up to be the monster
Yeah.
that he needs to be, and it's really up to all of Collective's lanes to understand that Karthus does not need to be babysitting any of you. He needs to be killing his camps on spawn and making sure that he is just going to outpace Lilia in this matchup. Now, for Lilia, I do think you can make a lot of things happen. You do have some decent setup in all three of your lanes. It's going to be more or less just kind of about the decisions that DNX wants to go for and kind of like the style of gameplay they really want to do. Because like you have options in all three lanes. It's more or less going to be for Shady Gecko in this matchup to actually like, okay, like which lane do I really want to play for? Because it's one of those things like going into games like, oh, I have options in all three lanes, but it's very hard to juggle all three lanes at the same
Right.
time because like you don't necessarily like you can't be everywhere all
Mhm.
at the same time, even though you do have the ability to pressure all three lanes at the same time.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit on the analyst desk about DNX and how maybe they'll take this opportunity against the collective when they've already locked in playoffs to maybe experiment a little bit.
Mhm.
This team comp doesn't feel too experimental from them. Maybe Lilia in the jungle is a little bit of a new look, but overall, I feel like this is pretty tried and true DNX. You know, they've got a carry in the top side, pretty self-sufficient bot lane here, and Vier on one of his trademarks as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Mhm.
they are definitely looking at this game one, probably testing the waters a little bit with collective. You
Right.
know, they definitely don't want to disrespect this team a little bit,
Mhm.
but they do have a lot of tools to make this game a little bit easier to play. But like, kind of like how you mentioned earlier with the whole with Karthus being in the game, yes, they do have a very long range dive, but once they're in, they have a very hard time getting out.
Mhm.
And if you're taking a lot of damage from Karthus's E, even though yeah, you can burst him out, but he can still do a lot of damage with his E and his ultimates during fights. And once those numbers get very, very low, we have the potential for an Akshan reset, a Jinx reset, and
Yeah.
these fights can go very, very easily. Like they can tip very, very easy to collective in a matter of like seconds if those two champions can get their resets.
Collective definitely going more for that 5v5 strategy. And so Orion, is that something that you think maybe is going to lend to the fact that they want to play the early game a little bit safer, as we do have an interesting Illowai lock in here? I'm not sure exactly what that is from Flan. We'll maybe get a notice in a second here. But yeah, okay, we're going to have to redo the draft. But for collective, are you expecting these lanes to just kind of play safe, farm up, and look to be that team fighting prowess, or do you still want to see Lobotomy Larry playing aggressive in this mid matchup, maybe having his support hover a little bit and allow him to play the style that he wants there?
Yeah, I definitely do think that collective can still play aggressive, but they really want this Karthus and drip irrigation in this and for this champion to be constantly clearing out a lot of these camps. I
Mhm.
do think for like the spot lane there is some kill potential there, but Braum makes it really hard to actually dive onto the Ash.
Yeah.
And also like you have some pretty good scaling options on your team, so it's one of those situations where you can make plays early, but as the game slowly goes on, if you are slightly losing or if the game is at an even state, you're probably pretty happy if you're collective
Yeah.
because you have the very tankiness of the Mundo that can just soak up a lot of the initial upfront damage. You have the two AD carries in this matchup, and you also just have Karthus that's going to straight up be
Yeah.
ulting people for half their HP in some of these team fights if he's able to get those items coming through. So it can just be one of those games where Collective's just like, okay, you know what? We're not going to do anything. We're going to nullify anything these guys want to do.
Right.
And it's very important to kind of stay even in gold and maybe even slightly behind because, yeah, they're going to look to make plays because they understand that they have the composition to do so. But it's really up to collective to make sure they can't actually make these kinds of plays and definitely just
Mhm.
nullify that beginning of the early stages.
At the very least, not fall too far behind. We did have a little bit of a DC here in Champion Select, so we are going to be going through the picks and bans here in Client once again. But I think we've pretty much said everything we want to say before this game one, so we're going to step away for a couple of minutes while they finish this up. But you've already seen the teams, you know what's happening. It is DNX looking to remain undefeated. The collective potentially fighting for their playoff lives here. So we'll be back in a couple minutes with game one.
Everybody, hold on. I'm about something. 3, 49, and lift off! No one dies screaming without me. I feel like I forgot to shoot something. You're starting to bore me. She's such a loser, always ready to cry. Ah, come on. What's the worst that could happen? 星に瞬きを伝えて守るものがあるからきっと強くなれる語るべき言葉なくした星の守りでは時の果て夢の果て闇に立ちすくんだ風を呼んでみたんだ空に向けて誰かを呼んでみたんだ光求めたソリチュードかすかなレゾナンス確かに届くロマンスそんな流れ星たちを抱き留めた明日が見えなくだって乗り越えなくちゃって奇跡の奇跡描き未来へつなぐ Growing High 心のフォトンが銀河にこぼれて道を強く照らす Burning Bright それぞれの思い秘めた星の守り手は空からの呼ぶ声に導かれた重ねる手と手には言葉なんかより伝わることがある熱い心通じ合った確かなレゾナンス見つけるのはエッセンス目指した意識の先がディスティネーション答えが見えなくてくじけそう
This is Ice-T,
Stone Cold Steve Austin, and
Matty Ice.
This is a cold call.
I convinced NFL teams to turn to cold water washing with Tide.
the NFL, your uniforms get dirty.
Tide can handle it, even in cold. Plus, if fans join in, they can save up to $150 on their energy bill.
looks like you just made the team, rookie.
Turn to cold with Tide.
And that's the bottom line.
It's got to be Tide. Energy savings based on average when switching from hot to cold and non-HE machines.
Oh, she's coming. Quick, get your phone. I'm going for it. I hope it's not too dark.
Got it. Look, I got a video of them walking up and a pic of you midair touching hands.
Sometimes the only way to find more in the world is to take a leap. Discover an entirely new world around you with the revolutionary Galaxy S22 from Samsung. Light up your nights with nightography and capture the moment the way you see it. Tap now to switch to Samsung Galaxy S22 at Samsung.com.
At HSBC, we know there's a great big